Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we explore the figures and events that shaped our world. Today, we're looking at someone who just shatters every single expectation you might have for an empress. We're talking about Theodora of Byzantium, a woman from the 6th century who came from, well, the absolute bottom of the social ladder in Constantinople, the world of actresses, mimes, the whole scene around the hippodrome, and somehow rose to become the co-ruler of the Roman Empire alongside Justinian I. So our mission today is to figure out what her power was really about. And to do that, you have to navigate sources that are just wildly contradictory. They're driven by politics, by personal hatred. So what was her real role? How did she become so indispensable?
That's the fascinating thing. Even her worst enemies, the people who wrote to destroy her reputation, can't help but show that she was never just a decorative empress. She was a serious political player. We see her mediating networks, taking charge in a crisis, and being this really decisive figure in the religious battles that were tearing the empire apart. But that's our challenge, and it's your challenge as a listener. We only know her through the eyes of elite men, and they all had an angle. So we have to try and separate the real historical woman from all the libel that was piled on top of her.
Okay, so let's set the stage. 6th century Constantinople. What was this city like?
Well, it's the heart of the Roman world at this point. It's massive, it's monumental, packed with people, but it's also incredibly sensitive to public opinion. The emperor couldn't just rule from the palace.
He had to control the street.
He had to control the street. And the heart of the street, the emotional center of the entire city, was the hippodrome.
And the factions there, the blues and the green, these weren't just like sports fans, right?
Not at all. You have to think of them more like political machines. They were these huge social networks that could mobilize thousands of people in an instant. They could channel popular anger, broker political deals, everything. Entertainment wasn't just entertainment. It was power.
And this is the world Theodora comes from, the world of actresses and mimes.
Exactly. And you have to understand what that meant. They were celebrities, sure. They were visible, popular, but they were also viewed with complete moral contempt by the elite.
It was a very strange, sort of ambiguous position to be in, despised, but also influential.
And legally, they were at the bottom. An actress couldn't marry a senator. It wasn't just frowned upon. It was literally against the law.
So the sources, especially the really nasty one, Procopius' Secret History, they place her right in the middle of this. Her father was, what, an animal keeper for the hippodrome?
That's the story he tells. An animal guardian. And whether that's true or not, the point he's making is clear. She's from this world of spectacle and moral disorder. But here's the twist. While her profession made her a symbol of everything the moralists hated, it also gave her things no aristocratic woman had.
Like what?
Visibility. Networks. A kind of street-level political intelligence. She understood how the city actually worked, not just the palace.
Okay, you mentioned Procopius. We have to talk about him because he's our main source, but he's also our main problem.
He really is. He was an insider, an advisor to the great General Belisarius, so he knew what was going on. But he seems to have written, well, 3 completely different versions of Theodora.
So how does that work?
Well, first you have his public work, The History of the Wars. In that book, Theodora is actually pretty impressive. She's firm, she's a symbol of stability, especially when things get tough.
Okay, the official version.
Exactly. Then you have his book called Buildings, which is just pure propaganda praising all of Justinian's construction projects. And in that one, she almost vanishes. She's just sort of absorbed into the glorious image of the regime.
And then there's the third one.
And then there's The Secret History, it was published after he died for obvious reasons. And in that, she is transformed into this demonic figure, a symbol of pure depravity, manipulation, cruelty, even witchcraft.
It sounds less like history and more like a character assassination.
That's precisely what it is. It's a political libel. Most scholars see it as the work of a man who felt deeply betrayed by the regime he served, and he's using Theodora as a symbol for everything he thinks went wrong.
So if it's so biased, can we actually trust anything in it?
Well, here's the thing. While the sensational stories about her youth are almost certainly exaggerated, the core facts of her life are actually confirmed by other, less hostile writers, people like John Malalas and John of Ephesus.
So what do they confirm?
They confirm she was Augusta, the empress. They confirm her deep involvement in politics and religion. And, crucially, they confirmed her central role in the Nika Revolt of 532. The basic resume is solid, even if Procopius's details are, poisonous.
There's one detail that seems plausible, though, her traveling outside of Constantinople before she met Justinian.
Yes, that's really important. It was common for performers to tour, and the sources suggest she spent time in the Eastern Mediterranean, places like Alexandria in Egypt.
And this is where she has some sort of transformation.
It seems so. This is likely where she developed her close ties to Miaphysite Christian groups.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down. Why is a specific type of Christianity so politically important here?
Because the empire was being torn apart by a huge theological debate after the Council of Chalcedon in 451. To put it simply, the official state church, the Chalcedonians, said that Christ had two separate natures, one human and one divine. But the Miaphysites, who were incredibly strong in vital provinces like Egypt and Syria, believed he had one unified nature.
And this wasn't just a philosophical debate.
Oh no, this was about regional identity, political power, and huge amounts of money. By connecting with the Miaphysites early on, Theodora gained a whole political network completely outside of the imperial establishment in Constantinople, a network that would become incredibly valuable.
So let's get to her meeting Justinian. He's the heir to the throne, and he decides he wants to marry this actress. That must have been explosive.
It was a political earthquake. Remember, it was illegal. He literally had to get his uncle, the reigning Emperor Justin, to change the law specifically so he could marry her.
Which just shows you how powerful his will already was.
It was a massive political event. It signaled that Justinian was willing to smash any social or legal barrier to get what he wanted, and what he wanted was her.
So in 527, he becomes emperor, and she becomes Augusta, empress. And that title wasn't just symbolic, was it?
Not at all. It gave her an official role in court ceremony, immense visibility, and a huge capacity for patronage. She became a center of power in her own right.
A gateway to the emperor.
A gateway and a power broker. People came to her with petitions. She could make or break careers. She understood the real mechanics of palace power, how to reward friends, punish enemies, and, most importantly, control the flow of information.
And that power was put to the ultimate test just a few years later in 532. The Nika Revolt.
This wasn't just a riot. This was the city exploding. The Hippodrome factions united with angry senators, and the whole capital went up in flames. The regime was on the verge of complete collapse.
And we have this incredibly famous, dramatic scene in the palace. Everyone's telling Justinian to flee, to save his own skin.
His whole court, his generals, they're all telling him it's over, get on the boat. And then Theodora speaks.
She refuses to go. She gives that speech, ending with the line, "The purple is a noble shroud," meaning it's better to die an emperor than live as an exile.
Right. And even if that speech was polished up later for the history books, the core of it rings true. Her intervention stopped the panic. It stiffened Justinian's resolve.
And the result?
A brutal crackdown. A massacre in the Hippodrome, actually. But it worked. The revolt was crushed, Justinian's power was solidified, and he began his massive rebuilding program, including the Hagia Sophia. For Theodora, though, Nika changed everything.
How so?
It transformed her image. She was no longer just a powerful woman at court. She was a pillar of the state itself, a force for stability.
After Nika, we really see her lean into her role in religious politics. You said Justinian was pushing the official Chalcedonian line, but she became the protector of the opposition, the Miaphysites.
Yes, and there are two ways to interpret this, and they probably both have some truth to them.
What's the first one?
The first is that it was genuine conviction, that she truly believed in their cause and wanted to protect these marginalized communities from persecution by the state.
And the second interpretation
is that it was brilliant political strategy. She knew that cracking down too hard on the Miaphysites would risk the loyalty of incredibly wealthy and important provinces like Egypt and Syria.
So by protecting them, she was acting as a kind of safety valve for the empire.
Exactly. She was a bridge. She kept channels of communication open. She sheltered bishops who were on the run. She was essentially running a parallel foreign policy to Justinian's, one designed to keep the empire from splintering. It was a masterful balancing act.
And she wielded real power inside the palace, too. She could take down major rivals.
Absolutely. The most famous example is John the Cappadocian, who was the Praetorian prefect, basically the guy running the administration and collecting the very harsh taxes. He was one of the most powerful men in the empire.
And Theodora brought him down. Procopius describes this incredibly complex conspiracy involving her and Antonina, the wife of General Belisarius.
Yes, it suggests this really effective female political alliance at the heart of the court. They could outmaneuver anyone. It shows she wasn't just an advisor. She was a hands-on political operator.
We also hear about her social initiatives, things related to protecting women.
That's right. Several sources connect her to laws against forced prostitution and the creation of shelters, sort of refuge houses for vulnerable women.
Which makes perfect sense given her background.
It makes total sense. She knew that world. She knew the exploitation and the vulnerability firsthand. So it seems she used her power to address the very system she came from.
So with all this power and the lingering stigma of her past, the regime had to, well, sell her image to the public. Which brings us to that famous mosaic in Ravenna.
The mosaic at Santa Telli's, it's a masterpiece of political propaganda. In it, you see Theodora presented as a sacred imperial figure. She's dressed in ceremonial robes, holding a chalice for the Eucharist, and she even has a halo.
There is absolutely no trace of the actress or the hippodrome there.
Zero. It's a visual argument cast in stone and glass. It's designed to completely overwrite her past and present her as a legitimate, divinely appointed co-ruler. It's the regime neutralizing the stigma through art.
We have to touch on the misogyny here, too. The attacks on her, especially from Procopius, are so personal, so sexualized. Why did her power provoke such a violent reaction?
Because she was a woman who mastered a political system designed by and for men. She used the informal channels of power available to women in the palace. Patronage, access, building networks, and she was better at it than almost anyone. And for a certain kind of traditional Roman aristocrat, like Procopius, a woman wielding that kind of influence was a threat to the natural order of things. So the attacks become intensely personal and sexualized as a way to undermine her legitimacy.
Theodora died in 548, and her death wasn't just a personal loss for Justinian, was it? It was a major political event.
A huge one. Justinian was devastated. He never remarried. But politically, her absence removed that crucial counterweight in the regime.
The safety valve.
The safety valve. Many historians argue that the empire's religious policies became much harsher and less flexible after she was gone. Her ability to mediate with the Miaphysites was irreplaceable. The whole balance of the court shifted.
So if we were to boil it all down, what's the final takeaway for someone trying to understand Theodora?
I think she represents two things. First, the incredible power of those behind-the-scenes palace mechanisms. She showed how access and patronage could be just as important as armies and laws. And second, she represents the sheer cost of social mobility in that world. For her to be accepted, it required this massive, ongoing campaign of legal changes, political maneuvering, and symbolic propaganda. She was absolutely central to the success and the survival of Justinian's reign.
It's incredible. More than almost anyone else, Theodora seems to embody that shift from the old Roman world to something distinctly Byzantine, where a life that was completely improbable could be transformed through sheer force of will into sacred sovereignty. E por hoje é isso, nos vemos no próximo episódio.